fun to do an ASMR that's a little spooky and season appropriate. I asked you if you'd be interested in hearing about my top 10 favorite horror games, and a lot of you seemed very excited. If you don't like horror games, I don't really go into any creepy details about any of them, so hopefully you'll still be able to enjoy this video. And a couple of the horror games are much more on the milder side, so maybe if you're looking for something to do on Halloween, you'll find something you might want to try. It was very hard narrowing down my list of favorite horror games to only 10, and I didn't rank them in any particular order. All of them are special to me for their own unique reasons, and I think they all represent important parts of the genre. I love horror games so much, not because I'm easily scared or enjoy being scared, but I find that there's so many creative and interesting stories, art styles, and unique aspects of games in the horror genre. So without further ado, here are my top 10 favorites. My first favorite is an RPG Maker game called Yume Nikki. You might have heard of this game before. It's probably one of the most well-known or popular RPG Maker horror games. And what I love about it is it's so beautiful and unique. Its structure is unlike a lot of other horror games. You're a hikikomori girl who's stuck in her apartment, but when you dream, you go to this nexus that has doors to all these different dream worlds. There's no super specific goal in the game, but you wander through all these beautiful, weird, and interesting landscapes of dreams, and you're looking for these items called effects. Some of these are a bicycle, or cat ears, or even a witch's broom to ride, and some of these effects can help you maneuver through the world. There aren't necessarily puzzles in a very strict or traditional sense, but as you explore this world and just wander, you might try things with the effects you find and interact with the characters or creatures that you see there, and you might be able to figure things out. It's an incredibly beautiful and sort of melancholic game. The music and atmosphere is amazing, and unlike anything else I've played, you can get lost in it for hours, and it truly does feel like a dream. It's so beautiful and special. If you haven't tried it, I highly recommend it, especially if you don't think you like horror games. It's really more of just an atmospheric, surreal type of horror than a scary, in-your-face sort of horror. What's so interesting about Yume Nikki is it's created many spin-off games. People have made all sorts of fan games with the same structure as the original Yume Nikki, of wandering these dream worlds and collecting the effects. My favorite Yume Nikki fan game is one called Dot Flow. I think it captures the spirit of Yume Nikki perfectly, but in a much more grisly, creepy, rusty, just more visceral type of way is the best way to put it. It also has amazing music, and I find the dreams in this one also very creative, and I really like a lot of the effects in the game. My second favorite horror game is a PS2 this game, and what I think makes it so unique, is there's no combat in the game. To avoid enemies, you just have to run and hide, which makes it far more stressful since you can't just fight back or hit your enemies. You aren't completely alone. You have a dog companion, Huey, a white German shepherd who you can command to attack the enemies or protect you. He isn't all-powerful, however, and he can get hurt, and the enemies never fully go down or die. You can really only incapacitate them for a certain amount of time, and their AI is very, very smart. They will chase you all throughout this castle, and they will find you. It's a very clever game mechanic, and not one I've really seen used in horror games before. Often you can fight, or there is some combat. I think the story is very interesting too, and I really enjoy the setting and the characters. You are a girl, Fiona, who after a car crash with her parents, wakes up to find that she's captured in this castle. You really only avoid about 3 characters, but each of them wants something very different from you. My favorite is the second enemy you encounter. I find her to be very creepy, and I enjoy her portion of the castle very much. You start off in a very normal castle. Bedrooms, castle grounds, gardens, and as you make your way through, you find weirder things, catacombs, science experiment laboratories, and I think the culmination of the story is interesting as well. I find it to be very fun for a horror game, and actually gave me some spooks, since I could never fight back. Also, when you beat the game, as you do with many PS2 era horror games, you unlock alternate costumes, and there's one for Fiona that's a full-body frog costume, and it's very cute and very silly to play the game again in this silly frog costume. My third favorite horror game, though I already mentioned it on my previous video, is Silent Hill 4. I love PS2 era horror games, and Silent Hill 4 is my favorite of the 4 original classic Silent Hills. It was the first one I ever played, and its atmosphere really captured me. I love a lot of the areas. They're so spooky and weird and surreal, and the music is amazing, and I enjoy a lot of the enemy, character, monster designs in Silent Hill 4. It is a great classic, even though it's not necessarily everyone's favorite Silent Hill. My fourth favorite horror game is another RPG Maker game called Ib. What I love about this game is I think it's such a great example of a well-done RPG Maker horror game. I think the pixel art is great, the story is fantastic, and it's very unique and original. You play as a little girl, Ib, who goes to an art gallery with her parents to see a specific artist. Eventually, you end up alone in the gallery and wander into a painting, which gets you caught in this painting world. I love the use of the painting and the artwork for these creepy enemies or interesting puzzles in the game. You aren't completely alone. Ib makes a companion comrade named Gary. He's an adult character, and it's interesting to see their bond and friendship grow over the game. And there are multiple endings depending on how you play and how kind you are, I believe. just love the artwork. There are clever puzzles. If you enjoy pixel games, pixelated art style games, it's very fun. It is an adventure horror game, so there's also no combat, but you must use your cleverness instead. My fifth favorite horror game is Fatal Frame 3. I love all of the Fatal Frame games, and have even played the fourth game, which never came to the US or North America. One of my friends modded a hacked Wii so he could get the English patch and the ROM of the game on it. I wasn't able to beat that one just because it got kind of buggy towards the end, but I am a huge Fatal Frame nerd. Many people cite the second Fatal Frame as their favorite, and I do love it. The story is fantastic, as is the setting, but my favorite is 3. It is in a snowy mansion. Fatal Frame games always take place in traditional old-style Japanese villages or mansions. You battle ghosts using a camera obscura, so you take pictures of the ghosts to deal damage. It's an incredibly clever battle mechanic, as it switches your view from fixed perspective third person to POV first person. Some of the ghosts move differently, and you get more power or attack bonus for the closer they are to you, or if you capture them mid-attack. So you have to take risks and be willing to get a little spooked for the ghosts to come in close enough. Film is limited, kind of like ammunition, so you have to be careful and clever about monitoring your film and how you're taking pictures of the ghosts. Fatal Frame 3, you play as 3 different characters. A new character, the main character from the first game, and a boy character who is related to the protagonists of the second game. What I love about Fatal Frame 3 is you have 3 different sort of player styles. The boy character can take more damage, but he is less effective with the camera. The girl from the first game, Miku, she has the strongest camera obscura power, I believe, but she takes damage the easiest. And the main character is a very good all-around character. You visit sort of alternate parts of the past 2 games in those respective characters' parts of the games, but mostly you're in this snowy, worn-down mansion. It's so beautiful. You only go to it when you dream, and it's just so just beautiful to keep repeating myself for a horror game. I love the story. There's so many creative and weird ghosts to fight. I think it's very creepy, but not too creepy. And when you're not in the spooky ghost world, you're in the main character's house, which you can investigate a couple things as the game goes by. I love it, and I think it's the best installment of the Fatal Frame games, in my mind. Alrighty, what number are we on now? 6. My 6th favorite horror game, which I also briefly talked about in my last video, is Siren. It's another clever PS2 horror game with interesting mechanics. You're basically avoiding and fighting these zombie sort of characters, but combat can be difficult as you pretty much die in 2 hits. The interesting mechanic is you can sight jack and look through the enemy's eyes and see where they're looking. You can't always tell where they are because it may be dark, but you can use it to sort of plan your path to the exit. You're always going from a point A to point B, occasionally trying to get an item or a person or something throughout. And avoiding the Shibito zombie enemies is paramount to success. So being able to understand the surroundings and get a good angle on the geography through the enemy character's eyes is important and such an interesting puzzle mechanic. Some of them walk, some of them are stationary, some of them can even fly, so it really changes how you're looking through them and their eyes. The most difficult parts of the game are when you have a companion and you have to make sure they don't die. It can be a clunky and frustrating game at times, but with such a unique concept and good storytelling and world building, I still think it's worth a go. My next favorite game is Detention, a wonderful Taiwanese indie horror game. It takes place during 1960s Taiwan, where Taiwan is under martial law from China. It serves as a backdrop for the story and is very important, and I certainly learned a lot about a point of history I knew nothing about. The art style is beautiful. It feels almost paper cutout in a way. It's side-scrolling, and the textures and colors are beautiful. It starts out very drab and gloomy colors, as a horror game would, but there are important parts of the story where it's bright and colorful and fantastic looking. The main character, the game is very much about her story, and I think it's as much an interesting character study as it is a horror game. In this game, to avoid the ghosts, you have to cover your mouth and hold your breath as you walk past them, but obviously you can't infinitely hold your breath. It's very interesting. It's an adventure sort of horror game. There's puzzles to solve, mostly being the main mechanic of the game. But it's a fantastic story. It's not too long, maybe 3 to 4 hours, maybe 5. I really wanted to play that studio's second game, Devotion, but it was removed from all the Steam stores and such due to having a joke that offended mainland China, which is really a shame because the game seemed really good, and for it to be seized by terrible politics is pretty upsetting. But you can at least check out Detention if you want to see a horror game that uses ghosts that isn't just your typical Japanese horror game. My next favorite game is the Resident Evil 2 Remake. Up until this game, I had never, ever played a Resident Evil game, surprisingly, despite being a huge classic and PS2 horror game fan. In my mind, they were always in competition with Silent Hill on which is the better PS2 series of horror games, so I just never tried them. And I don't usually find zombie games interesting or games where you use guns. I presume that it would be less scary having a gun in a game, as it's very strong and, a gun you can kill things with. But my boyfriend really loves the Resident Evil games, so I gave it a try. He said, "You have to try it. You love horror games." And I was wonderfully surprised. It was very stressful, and definitely the survival mechanics were very on point. I loved exploring the police station. I played as Leon, and I loved how the game progressed and thought it was very fun and challenging for a horror game. Since then, I've gone on to play Resident Evil 4 also loved, and I'm going to play Resident Evil 1 next. My last favorite horror game is a wonderful Swedish indie horror game called Yearwalk. I believe it's been ported to almost everything now, but I first played it on the phone. It genuinely scared me. It was so creepy. The game functions under this concept of a yearwalk tradition. You start out in old rural Sweden in this forest. You encounter all of these weird fairy tale folklore creatures that are very, very creepy. You solve puzzles, and you explore this lonely, creepy, snowy landscape to get to your goal of going to the church to learn your future. It's sort of a game within a game, as once you beat the initial game, you come across a journal of someone from modern day times who's researching this yearwalk tradition. The game reaches a sort of psychedelic crescendo that's so fantastic. The art is wonderful. The game design is really wonderful. It's fun to see a European horror game using spooky folklore elements from their culture. It's very scary, in my opinion, and I highly recommend it if you want a short and scary game. Well, thank you for listening to me go on about games I really love. I know it seems odd to be so fond of horror games, but I truly am. And my apologies for any odd cuts. There's been a lot of activity outside, airplanes, garbage trucks, so hopefully the editing isn't too choppy after we're all done. But I really wanted to share those games with you. Are any of these games your horror favorites? Do you like horror games? And do you have any recommendations for me? I'm always looking to try new things. I hope you have a wonderful day or evening, and I'll see you